Hi, this is Anita with 5 Minutes with Art. Art is something which can change the world in many ways. And today I want to talk about 7 important art movements. There's many different types of art movements, but these are maybe 7 that most people think about. And the first one, of course, is the Renaissance, which really took place from the 14th to 17th century throughout different parts of Europe. But you might ask, well, why is the Renaissance important? Why does the Renaissance matter? Well, the Renaissance didn't just give birth to brilliant paintings. It sparked a cultural rebirth. And that's one of the reasons why when we talk about art movements, most people will talk about the Renaissance. It reintroduced classical philosophy. It talked about the human experience through humanism. It fused science and art. Also, the Renaissance produced some of the greatest artists that we think about today. It's really interesting. If you do a Google search today, a famous artist, 2 artists that usually come up on the searches are Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. And a lot of times you'll see Raphael also up there. These are 3 artists from the Renaissance era that even today people are researching, studying, and checking about. That's why the Renaissance is so important. Renaissance had a huge impact even in our lives today and in art today. The other one was the Baroque movement, which was from the 1600s to 1750. And it was a propaganda type of art, but with style. It was born out of the Catholic Counter-Reformation. It, had intensity, contrast, movement. So, some of the great artists, of course, one that's talked about quite a bit is Caravaggio. He definitely was one of the great artists of the Baroque movement. So was Rembrandt. And Rembrandt, again, is another name which you see searched many times for. If you did a search for great artists, Rembrandt will always come up there. As, a lot of times, Peter, Paul Rubens, and many of the others that were in this movement. Neoclassicism is another movement, which was from the mid-17th and 19th century. And it, clean lines, classic themes, moral stories. Some of these artists here are not so well known as some of the others, but it really was a movement that did change the world. Jacques-Louis David, for example, was one of the artists there. Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres was another one. So they were also some of them that, were very important during this period. Romanticism was from the late 18th to the mid-19th century. And in the area of Francisco Gallo, who's a very famous artist, that, most people, again, he'll come up on the searches. But when we talk about another great art movement after probably Renaissance, most people think about something as Impressionism. And Impressionism was also an art movement that sort of changed the direction of art. When you think of Impressionism, you think of artists as Claude Monet, Renoir, Monet. Many of these artists, again, come up again as in the great art movement. What you don't see on here is the name of one artist, which is actually highly, highly researched, is Vincent van Gogh, because Vincent van Gogh is not considered to be impressionist, but post-impressionist. The next art movement that probably was important after Impressionism and post-impressionism was Cubanism. And that's where you find Pablo Picasso, as one of the great artists for that time. And the last art movement that we have down is abstract expressionism. Abstract expressionism really took place in New York. It changed the focus of where the art world was. Before this time, the art world was sort of pretty much in Europe, but then after World War II, this change started happening. Abstract expressionism was the 1940s, the 1950s. New York was becoming this great center of art. And some of the great artists of that was Jackson Pollock, who, again, if you did a search of great artists, his name usually always comes up. Mark Rothko, William de Kooning would be some of them that are considered the great abstract expressionism artists. And, abstract expressionism had a great impact not only in art in America, but art throughout the world. If you like to be able to read more about these 7 art movements, and like I said, it's not all of them, it's just 7 of them that we feel like changed the world. Even though if I would add one in there that's not there now would be, of course, Post-Impressionism with Vincent van Gogh. Because if you've been listening to my podcast, that he definitely is, one of my favorite artists. I love Van Gogh. I love his paintings. I love how he changed art. But unfortunately, he was not in the Impressionism movement. He was in the Post-Impressionism. But you can read my blog post on 7 art movements that change the world. You can see some of the art there, and you can learn more about some of the artists and who these important artists are. This is Anita from 5 Minutes with Art. Thank you for spending just a few minutes with us each week to be able to learn something about art. Art truly can change the world, and these art movements show how art does and can change the world. So you hope you'll join with us in learning about art and how art changes each of us and changes the world. Thank you.